Welcome to SAM Conversation, an online program of South Asia Monitor. I'm Col Anil Bhat, and our topic today is Face-Off on Icy Heights. Will India and China see complete disengagement in 2022? The army, which has been, I'll say, quite reticent in speaking out ever since our confrontation with the PLA of 2020 onwards. I say that in comparison to earlier confrontations, where there used to be serving people, serving commanders, chief downwards also making a statement now and then. This time it's been very rare. And for the Northern Army Commander, Lieutenant General Y.K. Joshi, to say so recently, just a few days ago, that Operation Snow Leopard is still on, I take it as significant. While we are quite aware of, from time to time, you can say in the past 8 months, 9 months, how much PLA has extended itself right up to Arunachal. They're making villages, or and also kind of very there's an unease that what else must they be trying, because it's quite obvious that they are not they are not in a position to face us in any conventional firefight on the borders. So not taking too long, not dwelling much longer over it, let's start. We have it's my pleasure to introduce Lieutenant General Vinod Bhatia, former DGMO, former Director of Center for Joint Warfare Studies, Professor Srikant Kondapalli, very accomplished, very highly studied person who's very into Chinese, very deep into Chinese affairs, and Mr. Iqbal Chand Malhotra, who in his own ways done a lot of work on China, apart from writing a book recently named Red Fear. Lieutenant Vinod Bhatia, please get the ball rolling.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be on the SAP platform, and especially today with you as the moderator and Professor Kondapalli and Mr. Iqbal Malhotra. I think we got two experts, and I'm going to be, it's a learning process for me. China, what it has done, we all know what it has done. So to expect that during 2022 we'll be able to resolve the LAC standoff or the forward deployment by the PLA, I think we should not look at any time frame for this. There are a few things which are critical. One is that there has been no escalation since June of 2020, since the Galwan days. There is no escalation whatsoever, either in space, in time, and also in intensity. So that I'll give the positive first. So that is a good indication. Second good indication is that we've been talking to each other at the political, at the diplomatic, and the military level. 13th round of talks was a bad one. We saw China in a very condescending, sort of a way, trying to tell India that you had an opportunity, lost it. But then coming back to the 14th round of talks again, the official press release after 13-hour talk, and with the Chinese, 12 to 13-hour talks are very normal. You go up and down, and after at the end of the day, you're really confused at what do the Chinese really want, what do the PLA wants. But we have to understand the PLA. When you talk to the PLA, The PLA is looking over its shoulders. We have a mandate as the military, Indian military. We have a mandate, so we know what to do, what to talk, what to expect. But the PLA comes there and they're looking over its shoulder to the commissar. It's a communist party. We already had three commanders of the Western Theatre Command having been possibly sacked. They've been changed definitely, but possibly sacked. So these uncertainties prevail in the PLA. So we should not look at any timeframes, and we should not look at every talk yielding results, positive results. The fact that we are talking and the fact that we continue to talk in itself is positive with the Chinese. The time is on our side. No, we should learn from the Chinese. And the Chinese said, bide your time and hide your strengths. I think we should learn that. We should understand that with China, we have a differential of about 5.5 to 1. We have a infrastructure differential. On their side, the infrastructure is much better, much better. They've got a multi-modal, multi-dimensional infrastructure. We are still building. We have not given it for many years, we did not give it the push, but right now we given it the push. So we need time to consolidate. We need time to build up. We have strengths. It's not that we don't have strengths. We have strengths in a defensive deployment all along the LAC, right from Karakoram to Kibutu. So that is our strength. We have the expertise, the experience in high-altitude warfare. That is our strength. We have the resilience and the stamina, logistics stamina, and the will to deploy along the line of actual control in numbers. That is our strength. We want a mirror deployment. We are a motivated army. We are a volunteer army. There are conscripts. So we have our strengths. But the fact remains that if you look at the overall thing, we really cannot, I find a lot of people asking, why can't we just push them out? It doesn't happen that way. It doesn't happen that way. No, we can't really push them out. And we have to keep talking, and we have to find a resolution through talks. There's two mighty nations, both nuclear armed nations, two of the largest armies in the world, and China also has technological advantages. Look at multi-domain warfare, the three warfare strategy which they have. So it is not that we should not be looking at the LAC, we should be looking at the overall comprehensive national power and overall Chinese strategy, the three warfare strategy, and what the Chinese can bring upon us. So for that, I will just finish out here. We should look at our own strategies rather than a resolution. And our strategy, at the cost of repetition, let me say that, should be a 3D strategy. The 3D strategy is defend the LAC, because if you do not defend the LAC, the others can't follow. Defend the LAC is the first one. Dominate the seas, dominate the Indian Ocean, dominate the 7 choke points. You dominate that, you are addressing China's strategic concerns, the strategic vulnerabilities. And that it is a threat in being. And the third thing is deter China's aggressive behavior by bind to balance with like-minded nations where we have Congress and convergence of interest. So I'll finish the right now, but we should not look at time frames for resolution. We have the stamina and we should continue with it. Let it be another 5 years, 10 years, how does it matter? After all, in the end, we took 6.5 years to resolve Sundrangchu. So it got resolved because we had deployed in strength out there. And we are following a very good policy, no blinking, no brinkmanship. If you look at the armed forces, we are very measured in our response. And what the Chief of the Army Staff said during Army Day is an indicator. He says, look, he told the nation, we are prepared. He told the armed forces, be prepared. He told the world that we are prepared. So these are indicators coming from a chief who speaks less and does more.
Thank you, Vinod. Thank you. Some profound observations there. Professor Srikant, Kondapalli, you please take on.
Well, I agree with General Bhatia. Thank you, Colonel Bhat, for the invite. And let me say good evening to all the fellow panelists as well. I agree with General Bhatia that we need to hold the fort and defend the LAC. We do have a few signals recently that, for example, the Russia, India, China trilateral meeting resulted in India not boycotting the Beijing Winter Olympics, but actually suggesting to participation in this. While many countries have been boycotting the Winter Olympics, at least diplomatically, this is a signal that India had sent. Second, signaling the Indian Space Research Organization and the OPPO group have collaborated on the NAVIC navigational issue on the high seas, 1,500 kilometers into the Indian Ocean, on tracing for humanitarian relief, disaster relief purposes. The third signaling is we have also a partial lifting of the ban on the infrastructure investments. And of course, the BRICS meeting is continuing. The SCO meeting has been continuing. The Copenhagen COP26, we did collaborate with the Chinese, although President Xi Jinping did not attend the meeting. Yet overall posture is about the G77 countries. So at the political level, there is some signaling, although as Dr. Jaishankar, the External Affairs Minister, said, unless until peace and tranquility prevails on the border, there is no way we can improve the bilateral relations further. And the June 15th night, 2020, when we lost 20 Indian soldiers, that is the basis for the overall bilateral relations. Now we have had 14 core commander level meetings. And September 2019 Moscow 5-point agreement, as well as the February 10th, 2021 Defense Ministerial meeting on the disengagement de-escalation process in all friction points. That has not yet been completed. We have between PP10 to PP17, petrol point 10 to 17 roughly, we have 3 areas where the disengagement de-escalation has not happened. But the February 10, 2021 agreement is for resolving the issue in all friction points. But that has not happened. And so the question arises whether in 2022 we can have any progress in this matter. What we have seen, of course, is a change in Chinese position. At the 23rd WMCC meeting, they have mentioned about the work now is related to conflict management rather than resolving the issues at the friction points. So there is a certain change in the discourse from the Chinese side. So we would assume that the Chinese would not budge in the...
Professor Kondapalli, if I may please interject, if you could just clarify on what you just said, this, conflict management rather than what was earlier, and this ISRO and OPPO, this tie-up, this I think for a lot of us it gives us a great unease, that there's a great chance here of our compromising our military, secrecy, because the kind of if you study the technicalities of the agreement, would you like to quickly?
Yes, thank you. While the agreement as such is very innocuous, it is about fishermen getting stuck on the high seas, and they want to know where they are located. So the navigational positioning issues can be provided through these monitoring systems. So it is quite an innocuous agreement as such, but people have raised the criticism that 218 apps have been banned soon after the June 15th incident. And so this appears to be not in a proper fashion that the ISRO could conclude an agreement, an MOU for this, although it is with OPPO India, not with OPPO China, but the whole of OPPO is
India,
under the control of China.
Under the OPPO China.
Yeah.
Okay,
so there is this,
and as far as this conflict management, do we take it as typical Chinese semantics?
It appears that the Chinese have decided not to go away from Depsang Plains, from the PP-15A, and also in Demchok, the 3 areas where we are facing problems of the disengagement and de-escalation. Those appears that they have not decided to walk away from those places. Although in Panpungso they did from the 0.3 to 0.8 they have withdrawn, went beyond the Sirijap. But in these areas they have not gone away, and so the issue has risen whether the Chinese have changed their position on the February 10th agreement between the two defense ministries. So it is a work in progress. The 14th Corps Commander level meeting has not resulted in the resolving in all the friction points.
Yes.
So that is why the speculation whether the Chinese have changed their position because of no progress in these talks. Of course, this is the second winter that the two armed forces are spending at around -30, -40 degrees. And China did face a lot of casualties. According to one number, 68 casualties on the Chinese side.
Owing to purely the weather.
Weather conditions, yes. They are not used to the high altitude terrain, while we have a huge stock of experience on Siachen and other areas. So in the light of this, the Chinese may relent in the end because the casualties are mounting, including the Western Theater Command commander, General Xu, who passed away. But he passed away, they said, because of cancer and pancreatic related problems. On the other hand, Indian Army has not reported any casualties so far, and that indicates that the relative strength is clear at the local ground level. Indian armed forces are much more tuned into the weather conditions rather than the Chinese side. While China had raised 6,793 Tibetan soldiers, but these are on the non-combat duties rather than in the combat. For example, in telecommunications, in logistics, in supplies, and others. From Chumbi Valley, from Nagari Prefecture, they have raised these forces because of their lack of experience in high altitude areas, operations. So that is the situation, which suggests that 2022 probably the Chinese would have to relent because we have stood the ground. The army chief had mentioned, as General Bhatia mentioned, that we are standing ground, and if no change in status quo, as the army chief mentioned, no change in status quo will be tolerated. So that is where we are in 2022.
Thank you, thank you. And may I also say, as they say in Hindi, aapke muh mein ghee shakkar, on the aspect of the PLA not being able to take all this for too long, and maybe they relent. Thank you. Iqbal, I await comments on whatever General Bhatia and Professor Kondapalli have said, and of course, much more from yourself. Please.
Thank you, Anil, and thank you for having me on your show. While I agree with Vinod's view on what he's expounded on the Chinese from a purely militaristic point of view from micro level, I don't entirely agree with Professor Kondapalli's point of view. My take on why the Chinese are so quiet right now, there are three factors, 3 points. The first is domestic Indian politics. Now, the Chinese have been wooing Mr. Modi since he was Chief Minister of Gujarat. And they have now discovered that despite the Indian withdrawal from the Chicken's Neck area in 2017, the Chinese have been unable to sort of either strong arm or cajole or coax Mr. Modi in towing their line. And their main aim was to get Mr. Modi onto the negotiating table and work out a tripartite solution on Kashmir with the Pakistanis on board. Now, when that didn't happen, they then wanted to ensure that Mr. Modi, or rather wait for a time when Mr. Modi becomes politically weak. And that is when they're going to strike. Now, Mr. Modi right now is facing the strongest domestic political challenges of his tenure. Since May last year, he has lost the Bengal elections. He has faced setbacks in the farmers' agitation, and he's facing a very tough battle in UP. He's facing a tough battle in Punjab. The BJP doesn't really count, but facing a tough battle in Uttarakhand. And there are going to be elections to the Rajya Sabha before the 30th of June, which will then result in a change in the composition of the current Rajya Sabha. And if the opposition ends up with 20 more seats as a result of the BJP losing ground in these forthcoming elections, if they lose ground, then the whole equation will change, because domestic policy will become difficult to push through to the Rajya Sabha. And then in July and August, we have our presidential election, and we have the vice president election as well. So the Chinese are not going to do anything, and their Pakistani clients as well, which would enable Mr. Modi to claim any kind of Balakot dividend for the second time. So the Chinese are going to remain quiet, because it is in their interest to see Mr. Modi lose political ground domestically. And it is only when the political leadership becomes even more enmeshed domestically that they will then strike. So they're waiting for the opportunity. Number two, there is a question of war in Europe. As you know, over the Ukraine, the Americans are now stepping up the heat. And Biden, having pulled out of Afghanistan, may now find himself enmeshed in a war in Europe. And after the First World War, Second World War, and the breakup of the Soviet Union, this is now the fourth juncture where the Western powers and the Russians are going to probably face each other in a conflict. Let us hope that no conflict arises. But as a consequence of the possibility of war in Europe, the Chinese and the Russians are going to get even closer together, because the Russians are very dependent on the Chinese for their electronics, and their entire armaments industry is dependent on Chinese electronics. Now, if there is war in Europe and America gets enmeshed in that war, it gives the Chinese a tremendous opportunity to take over Taiwan. Now, Taiwan, again, is very important because of the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company and the ban on sale of high-end semiconductors, the semiconductor technology and semiconductor machinery from the West to China, which has been in force since May of 2020. So the Chinese focus is going to be on Taiwan and taking over Taiwan, and they will then, the Russians and the Chinese, engage the Americans on a two-front war. Also, Chinese troops are now, 5,000 Chinese troops are in Iran to guard the new installations the Chinese are setting up as part of the deal that they struck with the Iranians a few months ago. So you find there's a lot of Chinese movement and Chinese activity and positioning. The third thing is that this year in the last year, 2021, we have had our highest ever trade deficit with China, which, according to the latest figures published by the government of India, stands at $69.4 billion, almost as high as our defense budget. Now, in 2020, you can say because of Corona, the trade deficit was down to $45.9 billion. But if you look at it from 2020, it's gone up by 50%. And if you argue, as the Honorable Commerce Minister has argued, that in percentage terms, this is because it's an anomaly, because it was a Corona year, you go to 2019, and the trade deficit was $56.8 billion. And if you ignore 2020, 56.8 billion to 69.4 billion, that is equal to about 26% increase. Now, when Mr. Vajpayee went to China and he kicked off the Sino-Indian trade, It started off, I think, in about 2001 or 2002 at $1 billion a year. Today, it stands at $125.7 billion. Now, in the last year of Manmohan Singh's government, the trade deficit was 39, the volume of trade was $39 billion. And in 7 years, it's trebled from $39 billion to $125 billion. Now, this trade deficit has decimated our industry. Particularly if you look at plastics and metallic goods, you look at active pharmaceutical ingredients, you look at chemicals, you look at auto components. In these industries, the Indian economy has suffered a deindustrialization. Now, to me, the government is either not interested or they simply have lost it, that they don't even have a plan 2 years after the onslaught of the Chinese thrust into our territory. As Professor Kondapalli says, that they are not withdrawing from the Depsang plains. They have no indication and no reason to withdraw from there. That 2 years after that, we are letting this trade deficit snowball. Now, I mean, in the overall sense of it, $69.4 billion is peanuts, but it's still good money because this trade deficit is paying for all the Chinese militaristic moves against us. So we are in fact paying them to screw us, simply put. And government has no plan on how they are going to rebuild, because all these industries existed in India. And these industries have been wiped out because of too much competition from the Chinese. And government has no plan. So I find it, quite bizarre. Now, let's go to when the Chinese will act and why they will act. Now, the Chinese semiconductor industry has been successfully, in parts, relocated in Xinjiang, in southern Xinjiang. They now need 2 raw materials to kickstart that. One is water, and the other is electricity. The Daimar Basha Dam and the Bunji Dam, which they are completing the construction of both these dams on the Indus River at a cost of about $16 billion, are going to generate enough electricity which will be diverted to Xinjiang because the Pakistan state is bankrupt. They cannot absorb the electricity. And the water is also going to be diverted to Xinjiang for the Chinese semiconductor industry. Now, the Chinese know that the window of opportunity that global warming and consequent glacial melt has given them in the surge of water into the Indus River from the 4 tributaries, the Galwan River, the Changchemo River, the Nubra River, the Shyok River, is a one-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And they have advanced into our territories because they want to take advantage of this. Now, it is my view that their ultimate strategic aim, whether they can achieve it or not, is to push the Indian army way beyond the west bank of the Indus River so that they have physical control over all the tributaries of the Indus that actually flow into POK. Now, the point is this, that when and where will they strike? Time is also running out for them because they don't have that much time. It's a 30-year window. And already a few years have passed. And so my view is this, that once they have looked at the issue of war in Europe and the opportunity that it provides for Taiwan, and once sufficiently the Indian polity gets more fractured because of domestic political compulsions and internecine political warfare. After all, there's an election in Gujarat later on this year. Then next year, there are elections in Maharashtra, in Rajasthan, in Madhya Pradesh. And then there is a general election. And the focus is going to be on domestic politics. Government of India is not thinking strategic. Government of India is trying to do a holding operation with the Chinese, hold the line. I mean, we know that from the time of the First World War that you've got to hold the line. If you don't hold the line, you're going to collapse. And great, brave generals like General Sagat Singh ensured that in 1967, the line was held in Nathula and it didn't collapse. But holding the line is not enough because you've got to support the army. You've got to make your strategic moves. You've got to then strengthen your economy to face up to the Chinese, and nothing like that is being done.
Iqbal, when you say strike, you really think that the PLA will actually strike in a firefight with us?
If they do not succeed in politically forcing us into a settlement of their liking in Kashmir, they will strike. Now, the question is that, look, you don't have to go in. Let me explain. You don't have to go into conventional war with ground forces and all that over there. You can strike our naval assets. Now, this bizarre Oppo-ISRO deal, it is ludicrous and it is absurd that we are trying to dominate the choke points of the Indian Ocean, and at the same hand, we are allowing them to get a window into ISRO, and they will try and break through the firewalls that ISRO has got and insert some malware into the system, so that our entire, we have a naval satellite called the Rukmini, and that is also tied up with ISRO, and our entire defense in the Indian Ocean is based on on the electronics, and we are inviting those guys in here. You're inviting your enemy into your home. Now, what could be more bizarre than this? I can't understand. So the war will not be on the ground, but they will cripple you economically. They will install a malware into your either banking system or into your any other civilian system, your power grid. What will you do? What kind of challenge how will you respond to that challenge?
And you feel that we have no expertise to counter all this?
See, the point is that firstly, you have to have a national consensus that China is your enemy number one, and you have to deal with it. And that national consensus must extend across all political parties. Then your system must be geared towards correcting the wrongs that have set in, that have enabled the Chinese economy to dominate us. You see, I go back to history. From 1841 to almost 1931, India had a favorable balance of trade with the Chinese, and Chinese silver flowed into India, and the government of India earned at least between 13 to 18% of its revenue from taxation on exports of opium to China.
But that was all while we were under the British.
It may be under the British government of India. We inherited, there was a transfer of power. The same government was there. The owners of the government changed. They don't look at it, this subtle difference that you're talking about. They look at it, us as Indians, and our Indian army was there under British officers, maybe, but they were there in China. Now they look at the continuum of history and they are going to screw us on this trade deficit. They have been screwing us, waiting for this opportunity, because they're going to take with compound interest all that silver that flowed out of China to pay for opium. Until they've got it back, they are going to continue to dominate us. They've got a stranglehold on our economy. They're choking our lifeblood. They're destroying our industries. The biggest problem is unemployment. And we're losing unemployment. We're losing employment in those very industries that we need to generate more employment, in plastics, in pharmaceuticals, in metal manufacture, in chemical engineering. These industries provide employment, and they're being decimated by the Chinese.
Thank you, Iqbal. Some very great inputs you've given, which need a lot of thought and countering. Vinod, would you like to comment on? And if you can please quickly also go through whatever our deployment, do we have all that we need by way of arms, equipment, habitat, etc.?
I find it quite surprising, actually, including the government statements. In the last now nearly 20 months plus, we are still trying to discern China's intent and strategic aims in doing what it did. So that is something which I cannot really comprehend. We should be very certain of what
Yes.
China's intent is, not was, is in doing what it did. Because there was peace and tranquility. It served the purpose of China, it served the purpose of India, and suddenly things did change. And it was, it's like Sun Tzu says, behind every challenge there is opportunity. And China took that opportunity during the COVID times. And it is not that it would have done, he would have done it straight away in March, April, he would have got everything in. To get about 6 odd divisions in, it takes time. Even with Chinese infrastructure, multimodal, it takes time. It takes about a month and a half to 2 months. Classes have to be built up. I'm a military man, so I'll talk military. But we are still discerning China's strategic intent. So I think there's something we have to really understand. What was China's strategic intent? If you cannot defeat the intent of China, if you cannot meet and mitigate that threat, I think we are talking, we are looking at every strategy as why China is doing that, whether it's semiconductors. What I agree with Mr. Iqbal, he's very right. The semiconductor industry needs, they need water, and there is water. The water basin is there. But to think that Galwan has got the water or Shok has got the waters, I don't know. Really, I don't know, because the waters are there for a certain period of time. Thereafter, the waters freeze. So
Well, Iqbal has come out in the past.
Served out there. And the water flow is not too much. Galwan doesn't have enough water actually. You can, most of the time, you can cross it in your, just holding hands, you can just cross it. It's not.
Thanks, the very good observation. Professor Kondapalli. Anything further? Srikant, can you hear us?
Yes. I think what could happen in 2022 is also that there is the Communist Party 20th Party Congress to be held in October. And it is not so easy for Xi Jinping to manage the factional struggles. A lot is happening there, including the 6th generation of leaders who are not appointed so far. And there is also the real estate bubble that has burst. Evergrande and a host of other companies have now burst. There is the restrictions placed on big business and the e-commerce platforms like Alibaba, Tencent, Meituan, and a host of others. There is also the cultural industry, which has now been kind of decimated in a way in China because of these campaigns that Xi Jinping launched. There is also the common prosperity scheme that he had floated, in which, as a Beijing economics professor said, robbing the rich to feed the poor. So this is, of course, a major campaign that is now going through. This suggests that there is a lot of domestic problem for China. And of course, one can divert the attention by having an operation on Galwan and other areas. But I see very less possibility because of the stout resistance from the Indian Armed Forces. Secondly, in Taiwan Straits, China has a huge shock to be faced in the event of the Ukraine fallout. Taiwan has one of the most modern armed forces. They also have several standoff weapon systems. And if China is willing to give up 1 million or 2 million people, it is quite possible that they can take over Taiwan. But that comes at a cost of 1 million, 2 million people. And besides that, there are 2 million Taiwanese living in Shanghai and other places. So potential jihadis you could see in China. So it is not a cakewalk for China to take Taiwan, unless until it is willing to give up several million, and of course, reversing the China rise in the event of setback in the Taiwan Straits. So I do not see 2022 as a cakewalk for China in any field. because their economy has contracted in the last quarter by nearly 4%. And while they maintain growth rate, like they did in the COVID years, it is all based on the exports and imports sector. And in the case of China, there is a state control over these trade-related matters. In the case of India, it is done by the private enterprises, strictly speaking. And if there are deficits that we faced in the last 1 year, it is the whole of the country approach not being implemented in the light of Galwan. We achieved the whole of the government approach, but not the whole of the country approach. 1 year before, 61% people had a negative view of China. 41% of people in India did not buy Chinese goods. However, the surpluses that China has indicated, we did not follow the whole of the country approach, for which the government of India cannot do much if you do not have the local businesses, enterprises buying Chinese goods. There is no way any government can do anything about it.
Thank you. Thank you. There's one more area I thought which we should very quickly bring our thoughts on. Our deployment in the I think we're quite clear about the Army's deployment. The PLA can't really budge even if they have plans. Is there any way we can make use of a fairly formidable Indian Navy? Very quick one, Vinod.
Yes, definitely. We have to empower our Navy. We got to build our Navy and empower them also. It's not only building, empower them. If we were to build, let's say, a training ship in Andaman Nicobar or possibly Kar Nicobar, and start joint training with the foreign navies out there. Look at the pressure, the signal it sends. We got to do strategic signaling. It's not that we just take a 200, 170 ship navy and you start dominating the seas. There are other things we can do at not very high cost, affordable cost. Whereas we strengthen our navy, build our navy, it takes time to build our navies. It is not only building ships; it takes time to train troops, to naval personnel, and to build the navy to the capabilities. In the meantime, let's do some strategic signaling. We have the advantage of locational advantage of the Kar Nicobar Islands, Andaman Nicobar Islands. We are not using them, we're not optimizing them. We have so I think Navy is one place we really need to do something, and then we got to build capabilities in other domains like cyber domain, space. We totally gone wrong. They throw
cyber and artificial intelligence.
Artificial intelligence, definitely technology has to be. We have to
because there's I think there's quite a bit.
Jump to the next stage of technology. We got to take more advantage from a low to medium technology. We should shift to a late more advantage and go straight to the next level rather than go graduated. But we're not doing
that. Thank you. Very quickly, Professor Kondapalli.
I have a point to make, if I may.
Yes, on the Indian Navy. Yeah, on the Indian Navy, I think in the whole post-Galwan aftermath, we have not used the Indian Navy to the extent that we should have. The signaling has not been done properly. Possibly we didn't want to escalate, but there is a lot that we could have done with the Indian Navy, both in the South China Sea as well as in the Indian Ocean region.
Thank you. Yes, Iqbal.
See, the most interesting thing about the Navy is that our indigenous aircraft carrier, INS Srikant, is undergoing sea trials. And we seem to have followed the lead of the Royal Navy that we still haven't got any aircraft for it. The Rafale and the Super Hornet are going to be doing trials. I mean, the Rafale is doing land-based and ship-based trials now, and then from March onwards, then the Super Hornet will do them. And by that time, they'll then decide when they will induct and what aircraft they will induct and when those aircraft will come in. So you've got a big aircraft carrier that doesn't have any aircraft and cannot be effectively deployed. Now, I mean, this is unacceptable for any government that is facing a threat of the magnitude that we are facing from the Chinese in almost every aspect of our lives. So the Navy needs to be activated, and the Navy needs to be deployed more effectively in the South China Sea, in the Straits of Malacca. More, I mean, the Navy is doing a lot of exercises, but as Vinod also said, that you have to maybe base some maritime Jaguar aircraft in the Andaman Islands, beef up your aerial strength over there, over the maritime domain. Also use the Lakshadweep because you can interdict a lot of shipping that's coming from the Persian Gulf via the Lakshadweep. You've got islands in the sea which are effectively aircraft carriers. So you're going to deploy, but you have to take a more proactive, not a reactive position. We are reacting to what the Chinese are doing. We are not preempting them. We are not doing any war games or any economic war games or any politico-economic war games that actually figure out what our options as a nation are today against the Chinese. And our threat is not just on the ground, it's all over. It's in the space, it's in the cyber domain, it's in the electromagnetic domain, it's everywhere, it's in the airwaves. So we have to first do a national security assessment of what is a threat that we face from China and in what areas, and then actually focus on preparing ourselves on how to overcome those threats. After all, if we don't give respect to our adversary or to our enemy, then we are going to be caught with our pants down, as we all traditionally have been caught for the last 60, 70 years. Because it's not such a simple matter. I mean, why are the Chinese logically in the Depsang Plains? Why are they in the Gogra Hot Springs region? Why are they spending a second winter eyeball to eyeball with the Indian Army? Now let's see, what are they fighting for? Are they fighting for inhospitable real estate? Doesn't make any sense. They must have got an end goal in mind. What is the end goal? Now, I'm not talking about the strength of the Galwan River. I said combined together, these are the 4 tributaries of the Indus. Today, modern hydrology can do wonders with river water. And the fact is that the Siachen Glacier has 100 million acre-feet of fresh water, which is enough to provide for the water supply of Delhi with 20 odd million people for 55 years. I mean, that's a lot of water. And we are talking here about vacating the Siachen Glacier. We have to defend the glacier. That's our territory. We have to defend all the glaciers in that region because this is all fresh water. And there are advances in modern hydrology that we are not aware of, that the Chinese, they're so good in infrastructure projects. After all, in the Indus, on the dams they're building along with them 50-kilometer long storage reservoirs. Why are they storing water? Once you've generated electricity, you release the water for agriculture. You don't store it. You're storing it to use it in some alternative use. What is that alternative use? What is the equation that the Chinese have with the Pakistanis? And how is that likely to affect us? I mean, these are issues that we need to go into. We can't be so superficial and say it's this and it's that. And the government must let private sector do what they want. The private sector is importing. You damn well ban the import from China. You cut down trade with China. If you have to save your economy, if you have to generate employment, where are we going to generate employment for all these people? Look at what happened in Bihar 2 days ago when they burnt those railway wagons. There are MAs who are applying for the pathetic jobs of railway gangmen. I mean, this is the tragedy we are facing. And we can't be blasé about this. We have to have some kind of national plan to be able to face this challenge. Sorry, I disagree with this kind of laissez-faire, free enterprise view. Guys, businesses are importing from China, let them import. It's their choice. No, you've got to come in and curtail that choice if your national security is at risk. if your existence as an independent society is at risk.
No, agreed. Thank you, Iqbal. Only because of time constraints, I'm very grateful to all three of you for bringing out some very, very relevant, points and issues which the government must address, and we must not forget that Sun Tzu or Mao or anyone, no matter what they have, what they what their strengths were, which are supposed to be the strengths of the Chinese Communist Party today and the PLA. There's an Indian mind which is which is no less than any, and one can only hope that the government is doesn't delay and takes all the steps necessary, because like God bless his soul, Mr. George Fernandez had said very clearly, China is India's enemy number one. And I don't think there is any change in that. Thank you all, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, my son.